It is rolling.
Okay, so in this video we will show how to carve and the limits of something we call, or something is called the posterior palatal seal. And the posterior palatal seal, it's in the posterior limit of the denture. We are going to carve as a little canal that will create on the denture a positive acrylic that will create a posterior seal, just like we call it. And why do we do that? And how and where? Well, if we let's mark down first of all the posterior limit of a denture.
The peripheral limit, yeah.
The peripheral limit, exactly. Thank you, Dr. Wally. Of the denture. And this goes from where to where? Wallace?
For the posterior palatal seal, from hamular notch to hamular notch.
Right.
Passing through the fovea palatinis.
Passing through the foveas palatinis, just like we're doing it here. And if we say this, then this would be the posterior limit of any denture, right?
Well,
See or no?
That's true on the mannequin, but in the mouth, you want to mark a vibrating line.
Exactly.
Which is movement, functional movement, so to speak, and might be a little different than the fovea palatinis.
In this case, we're using the foveas palatinis because we don't have that moving palate. But remember, this is created by the two palatine bones, and if you see it on your mannequin, you will see how the palatine bone have like this butterfly-ish kind of shape that we'll mark here. In real patients, we will ask the patient to deflect or move that posterior palate, and from there, that's how we're gonna decide where is this posterior limit going. Now that we have that, anterior to this, and based on what we're trying to get here, anterior to the foveas palatinas, we are going to trace another line, and this line will be the posterior limit of this
Posterior
palatal seal.
Yeah.
Posterior palatal
1 millimeter anterior.
1 millimeter anterior to those foveas palatinas. Let me draw it like this. And going all the way to the posterior limit, passing the raphe. What's raphe?
Pterygomandibular
raphe.
Yes.
Okay? And then anterior to that, I'm going to mark another one, which would be the deepest part of this feature we're carving into the stone. Okay? And I'm taking this time so you guys can picture what is it that we're trying to get. So this red portion would be the deepest portion of the canal or the groove that I'm gonna create. Then after that, I will follow the shape of this palatine bone all the way to the foveas palatinis. The shape of this palatine bone all the way to the foveas palatinis, okay? And this is what we want to have. If I say it here, we have the posterior limit or the vibrating line, and then this is where it's gonna start. The groove I'm making, this is where it's going to start, or the posterior limit of that post-palatal seal. The red portion will be the deepest portion or the deepest area of the posterior palatal seal, and then we'll fade that groove into this butterfly-looking shape, which is the butterfly-looking shape of the palatine bone.
So the most posterior line is the vibrating line, which is the posterior limit of the palate of the denture. It goes beyond the posterior palatal seal.
It goes beyond, right, Wally?
Yep, by a millimeter or two.
Okay, so we have posterior limit of denture, posterior limit of posterior palatal seal, deepest part of posterior palatal seal, and the butterfly looking of fading of the groove of the posterior palatal seal. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a number 4 burr that comes in the burr block that you all have. Okay? And I'm going to carve the most or the deepest.
It's turning purple.
And yes, because we are purple and gold, I'm going past this, and look at this. Now, I have the groove anterior to the foveas palatinas, exactly where the red stripe was, and that's how we're gonna trace or mark the groove for the posterior palatal seal. What's gonna happen with this? Once we do the processing of the denture, we will have a positive acrylic right there that whenever the patient sets that denture in, it's gonna make a seal on that limit.
It'll actually embed itself in that soft compressible tissue a little bit.
Yes. And then with the knife, what I'm going to do is I'm just gonna fade this portion into this butterfly looking, right? Always leaving that most or that deepest part intact, and this is just so we don't have a groove by itself, so we have more like a what do you want?
It's 2 inclined planes meeting in the deepest area. You're not carving out the entire posterior palatal seal area like a flat bottom lake.
Exactly.
Not making a swimming pool here.
We're just
It's all the shallow end.
no swimming pools. It's just a small. Looks nice, huh? Thank you for these models. Dr. Van Norbeek made it possible.
Well, the
and
DLT students made it for us, but
DLT students for sure
we used some
made it possible.
latex paint coloring to put in white diastone. That's why it's harder for him to carve, to make it purple. And then we spray painted a yellowish color. It looks more like a Yellowstone cast, but it gives us our purple and gold.
It results.
Julio's going to make a black and gold one at some time. So he
But
can
you know how
have the
Julio
same.
is. He promises and promises.
Well, he's a busy man.
So
Now he's using a cleoid discoid to kind of fine tune it in areas.
again, I'm restriking that deepest portion of it. Okay. And then from there, I just kind of like fade the cut towards the anterior section. And this is how we end up with the posterior palatal seal,
Now,
where
I'd also suggest you carve in the vibrating line, because when the denture's processed, the lab will trim the posterior aspect of the palate up to the first bead you leave for them. So if you have that, they'll stop there.
right here.
Otherwise, they'll go all the way to the posterior palatal seal. And we really want a little flat area extending beyond the posterior palatal seal.
Okay.
Doesn't have to be as aggressive as the other, but you could use like a number 2 round or something, but I don't know that you have that in your kit.
I think this one is doing a pretty
Cleoid
good job.
discoid, yeah.
Oh yeah. Very good job.
It's the cleoid part, right?
It's a cleoid part. So now, Laptex will really be sure what will be the posterior limit of the denture, right?
Correct.
As we know, the periphery will be the deepest functional part of the vestibule, right? But on the posterior, normally is the vibrating line, and this vibrating line, we capture it by doing the movements we've mentioned before. So this is posterior palatal seal 101. Cut.
Ta-da. Okay, we're rolling.
Okay, as we just finished carving this posterior palatal seal, and we show you the different aspects and the different deepness of them. Also now Dr. Van, what he just did is he just broke or sectioned this model apart, so I can show you a cross section portion of it. For example, on the posterior limit on the behind the hamular notch, and you can see from. Can you see it there? Mm-hmm. And you can see how deep this goes on the posterior part, on the hamular notch itself, right? And how on this side we got that deepest portion, and then it starts blending towards the anterior section.
That's halfway between the midline and the hamular notch.
Right there.
Well, that's the hamular notch right there. Okay.
And then as I go more into the midline, I can still see that deep portion of it, but I also see how it gets a little bit more shallow. Can you see it there? Right? And then on the butterfly section, I see the deep portion of it, and then how it blends, how this blends.
Kind of bevels, or like a guiding plane type of thing.
With where the butterfly is and the deep portion. Also, you want to also notice the posterior vibration line right there, which will limit the posterior aspect of the denture.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
If we put it all together, we can see the difference in color. You cannot see the depth of it, and that's why we show you that. But this is how a posterior palatal seal should look like.